This is the second SPSS video tutorial to accompany Research Methods, Statistics, and Applications textbooks. I recommend you follow along in the Student Study Guide with IBM SPSS Workbook. For this example, imagine that we created a brief research methods questionnaire to assess how students feel about the class. Now, between you and me, we all know that people love this class, best class ever. But imagine that we wanted to find out how attitudes vary. So you'll notice we have 4 questions assessing attitudes toward research methods, and then we also have some simple demographic questions to assess the participants' gender and age. After we collect data, the first thing that we want to do before we even look at SPSS is we want to look at the raw data. This is the original questionnaires that people completed. Now notice with this one, we wouldn't even want to enter this into SPSS because the person clearly did not pay attention or they were goofing around. The other thing that we want to do is we want to give each questionnaire a unique ID number. This ensures that we can connect the data in SPSS to our raw data. Okay, let's get started in SPSS. You'll notice on this screen I have SPSS set up and open on my left, and then I scanned in the research methods questionnaires so I could show you how to enter this data into SPSS. The first step is to set up your data set. So we want to make sure that we're in variable view in SPSS. The next step is to give each of your variables a unique name. And then this can be pretty much anything that we want it to be. So I'm just going to call the first one ID because that makes sense. And then to follow along with the book, I'm going to give it the same names. But for the most part, with some exceptions, you can name them anything that you want. So this is my third question. I'm going to call look forward. My fourth question I'm going to call love. Down here I'm going to call this gender and age. Now I mentioned a couple exceptions to naming your variable. You're not allowed in SPSS to start with a number. So if I wanted to call it 1Q, it's going to tell me, nope, can't do that. I could call it Q1, and that would be fine. I can also not have any spaces, so I couldn't call it learn question 1, gives me a little error. And I also cannot add any special symbols like an exclamation point or an asterisk or anything like that. And now I'm just going to get rid of this. I'm going to click on the entire row, right click it, and click clear. So we can move on to the next step, which is making sure simply that all of your variables are numeric. So SPSS can only really analyze numbers. You cannot have any words in there. You can have some string, what we call string variables, if you just wanted to keep some qualitative information in your data set, but to actually run any statistical analysis, it has to be quantitative data. So on to step 4 in the book, we might want to add a label. Now this is not necessary for all data sets, especially a short one. This is really just a reminder to you so you don't have to keep going back and looking at what your raw data was. So if I wanted to add labels, I could call this ID, I could call the next one research methods, RM, good learning experience. So just a little shortcut. I could also just write the whole question if I really wanted to keep a record of the raw data. But again, this isn't really necessary. And I only use these labels when I have a data set that's pretty large and that I'm going to be dealing with over a long period of time. If you're doing short assignments for a class, you can likely skip this step and get away with it. The next step is to look at your values. And for your values, this is basically, again, just something to remind yourself how your data was coded. This is most important for nominal data categories, so you can call male 1 or 0 or 87, whatever you want, and so it's important to tell yourself, to tell SPSS how you coded your nominal data. It's also a good idea for interval data, so in this case we've got a scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree, and we want to make sure that we remember what strongly agree was. Was that a lower number? Was that a higher number? It's not important for ratio variables such as ID number or age. So for values, I'm just going to click on this, and I'm going to click on that little dot, dot, dot. And I'm going to tell SPSS, in this case, I want a value of 1 for my first question, research methods is a good experience, to mean strongly disagree. And then I'm going to click add. And then 2 is going to be disagree. And I'm going to click add. And then 3 is agree. Add. 4 is strongly agree. And I'm going to click OK. Now again, because you're really just using this to tell yourself and SPSS how the variables are coded in what direction, I could have just done the lowest one and stopped, just as a reminder to myself, or I could do the lowest one and the highest one, and that would be sufficient as a reminder. Now, if I wanted to do this multiple times, it can be kind of a pain, especially when you've got a lot of data. So you can click on that, and then you can, it's a little bit hard to capture. When it turns blue like that, if you right click it and you click copy, and then I can select these two and hit paste. And so now I've got my same codes in multiple times. Now for gender, again, this is the most important one of this data set, because nominal data, the numbers aren't really meaningful. They're just used as placeholders to tell SPSS what a 1 represents or what a 0 represents. So I can really call this however I want. You just want to make sure that you remember. So that's why we add value labels. So in this case, I'm going to call 1 male, 2 I'm going to designate as female, and 3 is going to be my non-binary. But again, I could have done this the other way. 2 could have been male, 0 could have been male. However you designate is fine. And then for age, because this is a ratio variable, the value labels doesn't really make sense, so I just am going to leave that blank. Now we are ready to enter data. And then I'm going to switch my screen to data view by clicking right here. And you'll notice that your variable names show up at the top here. In SPSS, 1 row represents 1 participant for the most part. It gets a little bit more complicated when we get into some more advanced analyses, but for now, think about 1 row as 1 participant. So for our first participant, I'm going to enter this data here, and their ID number is 1. Learning experience, since I coded strongly agree as 4, that's going to be a 4. Disagree is going to be a 2. Agree is a 3. And strongly agree is a 4. Their gender I coded as male equals 1, so I'm going to give them a 1 there. And age, I'm just going to enter what they wrote there. Okay, so we don't want to lose all that we've done, so I'm going to go ahead and save this file. I'm going to click on File, Save, and then I'm just going to put it under my share space, and I'm going to call it RMA questionnaire. Get in the habit of saving it often. Now you notice whenever I do any kind of command, the output file pops up. To avoid this happening when we're doing things where the output really doesn't matter, I usually, instead of just exiting out, I kind of pull it down here and hide it so that it doesn't keep bugging me. Some people prefer to see the actual codes here. And if you wanted to do that, you could change it from view, view, and then value labels. And see, now the codes that I put in come up. I don't particularly like this, but I just wanted to show you how to do it if you prefer it this way. Let's enter our second participant this way. So for ID, it's going to be 2. For learning experience, now I can click on it and I can pull down and see agree. For afraid, if I click on it, I can pull down and see disagree, and then pull down and do agree, and pull down and do agree, and then male, female, and then the age, I'll just enter 19. That's a good strategy if you're afraid you're going to forget and you don't want to keep going back and looking at, okay, how did I code male? How did I code my data? Again, I don't particularly like this. I think it takes a little bit longer, but this is a good idea if you're starting off and you feel like it's going to just increase your chances that your data entry is going to be correct. Let's look at another one. This is a little bit interesting because this person, you'll notice for their first question, the research methods is a good learning experience, they actually circled 3 items. There's a couple different things we could do with this. So let me go ahead and enter my 3 for my ID number. For this first question, the learning experience, I could leave it blank if I thought, oh, they just didn't really know what they were doing and it's going to be nonsensical. They seem to have filled out everything else okay, so I don't want to completely throw out their data. But if I saw something like that and I was worried that it was meaningless, I might just leave it blank. When I say leave it blank, I mean just leave that little dot there and then go ahead and enter the rest of the data. Now, this would make sense to leave it blank if they had circled all of it and their answer really would not make any sense. But clearly it seems like this person had an opinion, they just couldn't identify the exact response they wanted. In cases like this, the important piece is just to make sure that you treat this type of data in a consistent way. So every time you see somebody circling multiple items, you treat it the same way. One option would be to enter the middle score. In this case, it would be agree, which is 3. And if it was between agree and strongly disagree, it might be a 3.5. So that would be the middle score. I could also just decide whenever someone circles multiple answers that I do the lowest score, so I could enter 2, or I could say I'm going to do the highest score. I could enter 4. The important piece again is consistency. You don't want to sometimes do the lowest, sometimes do the middle, sometimes do the highest. Then enter the rest of your data. I'm just showing it super sped up here. Once you are done entering your data, make sure you save it. And then you can exit out until you're ready to do something else with this data set. And I'm going to exit that. At this point, I do not need to save my output because I haven't run any analyses. In the next few videos, I'll show you how to prepare your data for analyses.